Hello and welcome to Postgres FM, a weekly show about all things PostgreSQL. I am Michael, founder of PG Mustard, and today I am joined by Alicja Kucharczyk, Program Manager for Azure Database for PostgreSQL at Microsoft and organizer of the Warsaw PostgreSQL user group. Thank you so much for joining me today, Alicja. It's an honor to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Michael.
Wonderful. Well, I proposed a topic this week, but mainly because you're one of the biggest fans, or at least advocates of this tool, I think, in the world. But it's probably an underused tool, in my opinion, anyway. I definitely don't use it at times when I could or should, and I know most people that could be using it have never even heard of it, at least newer users. So what are we going to be talking about today?
Yeah, about my favorite tool, which is PG Badger, which is totally open source, which is really great. It's allows you to do really comprehensive troubleshooting, and I believe it's top notch of the class.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to give us a little bit of background on the tool or how people use it?
Yes, absolutely. So maybe I will start with my own story because I've learned that the tool exists over, I believe, 10 years ago when I was working for Polish Bank. And the process in there was each time something was happening, they started to generate a PG Badger report. And that was just always the first step that they've been doing. So that was the place where I learned that this tool exists. And over the years, actually, because I was moving from company to company, and I started to be Postgres consultant. And back then, that started to be my main tool for doing the troubleshooting. Because, as a consultant, you don't really know the system. You are going to the customer, something has happened, and, the customer is saying, okay, for instance, CPU is very high, or latency of the query, suddenly has grown. But you don't really have any knowledge about the system, right? And PG Badger is really one of the best tools to really quickly get knowledge about the workload that is happening within your database. And I really like the PG Badger also that it's showing you really comprehensive picture, because you might know other tools, similar tools like pgstat statements. And it's not that I want to say that this is a bad tool or anything. I don't use pgstat statement, but I know that many people do. But pgstat statement is actually just one tab in the PG Badger report. And next to that, you've got also report about the temporary files. You've got really nicely aggregated errors. So everything that you've got in the logs that are errors, fatals, warnings, it's really nicely aggregated on the events tab. You would also have the logs, and logs with it's CK, right? Not logs, but logs. I know it's easy to mix this two. So you also have these logs. You've got the number of connections, number of sessions. So you really have comprehensive view. For instance, if you've got pgstat statements, you see, okay, this query was executed 1,000 times, and the total time it was this, and the average time was this, right? You would have the same thing in PG Badger, but the difference is in PG Badger, you can quickly go to another tab, for instance, a temporary files tab, and see that, okay, this execution time was caused actually because this query was generating temporary files, or maybe it was waiting for a log. So that's why, I do prefer PG Badger over pgstat statements and other tools, because it's giving me this, comprehensive view.
Yeah, I like it. Shots fired right up top. I'm a big fan of pgstat statements as well, so I'm hoping to be somewhat converted here. I definitely think there's pros of both. So with PG Badger, it's a log analysis so it's a standalone tool as well, right? So open source, as you said, we can install it wherever and analyze our log files for anything that we can spit out to the log. So as you mentioned, logs, yeah, so wait events, errors as well. That's a big missing part of pgstat statements. So sometimes it's quite common advice to have a timeout, right? If you have queries that are taking more than, I don't know, on some systems might be 30 seconds, time them out instead of letting them complete. In pgstat statements, we don't see those at all, but in PG Badger, we can see those because of the errors, right?
Absolutely. Yes. And the errors actually, it's helping with other problems. Like recently, I was troubleshooting logical replication errors. And if you are just, have the plain text log and you've got just one error, it's really not easy, like to go, up like thousands of lines up and see what was the root cause error, right? Because sometimes you've got
Yeah.
like one error and this is causing the whole other errors, right? Like in this case. And in PG Badger, you're seeing like that, that's great because of the aggregation that PG Badger is doing.
Nice. So, because we're reliant on the logs here, I would like to ask, a lot of people won't have, a lot of the default settings are to not log a lot of important settings. So a lot of people's logs, if they're new to Postgres or if they're using a managed provider and haven't set any settings, they won't have many of the things. So if they ran PG Badger now, I'm guessing a lot of them wouldn't get some of the reports you're talking about because they wouldn't have the right settings on. Is that fair?
Yes, absolutely. Like with default settings, you would probably have like a very poor PG Badger report because, as you said, like PG Badger is just Perl script that is just taking the text files, the text logs as the input, and then generating HTML report as the output, right? So whatever is in logs, it will be regenerated, like it will be parsed and it will be aggregated in this really nice PG Badger format. But if something is not in the logs, then obviously you will not see that, right? So for instance, if you want to see the logs this time, like you need to have log I might mix the name logs on, right? There's one setting in the Postgres like that, you need to have logs locked to be able to generate that.
Yeah, lock weights, I think it is.
Lock weights, yes, but
Yeah.
I believe this is the one. And this is responsible for the logs tab in the PG Badger. So if you've got this off, you will not see anything. Also, like the logline prefix is super important. So, the default prefix, it's pretty much poor. And I'm using the one that is actually recommended by PG Badger, and it contains a lot of stuff like database name, username, application name, of course, like the timestamp, and it also has like a host, so the IP of the server that connection coming from. And this allows you to have really rich PG Badger, because PG Badger is able also to split the queries and different tabs per database, per user. So it's able to show you, for instance, how many select queries were on particular database or was issued by particular user. So, but you need logline prefix for that. Otherwise, if you've got really short, default, you will not see a lot of useful information. But, I believe in here, the PG Badger documentation is pretty good. You've got the entire list of the settings that you need to set.
Yeah.
And most of that is safe. I would say most, because you've got, of course, one setting, log mean duration statement, which is might be super dangerous, right? Of course, maybe just to explain, log mean duration statement, it's the setting that is regulating how many queries we want to log into the text logs. And by default, this is -1, it means no. And 0 means log everything. So everything means even select one, something that is under milliseconds, right? With 0, you will see a huge impact on your database. So, you always need to kind of adjust this to your system, to the workload you've got, how intensive, your database is processing the queries. If you've got analytical database, right, super huge data amounts that you've got, 5 queries per hour, probably not many of you, but yeah, let's say log mean duration statement 0 is okay then. But with millions, thousands of queries per second, this is a killer. I saw even 40% overhead of the overall performance, with log mean duration statement 0. So this is dangerous. I usually start with something around between 1 minute to 10 minutes, depending on the system.
Oh wow.
of the so depending on the declared intensivity, like let's say of the system, depends what customer is telling me. Okay, it's super intensive, it's not, right? So let's say we are starting from 1 minute, and then we see the overhead. If it's huge, we are going up. If it's not huge, then we're trying like to go a bit down with the setting.
When you say 1 minute, you mean only log the duration of statements that take longer than 60
1 minute.
seconds?
Yes,
Wow,
yes,
wow,
yes,
wow.
yes, yes, yes.
I thought you were going to go much lower, but that makes a lot of sense, just in case
No,
there's a huge overhead.
exactly. This is like to be on the safe side, right? Because otherwise, if you've got production system,
Yeah.
then you go too low, and then you've got an outage, and yeah.
And I don't think this requires a restart, right? So you can reload the config, and it's not a huge overhead to changing that one. But yeah, that's a really good point.
Exactly.
Without that, we get almost nothing. Like we don't get any reporting on the slow statements. But I guess the trade-off is if our system's biggest bottleneck on the CPU, let's say the customer mentioned they have high CPU, and that's mostly being caused by millions of executions of very fast queries, then we don't spot them. So it's that trade-off between slow queries being the issue versus lots of fast queries being the issue.
It is, but in this kind of this is a very good point, because you are right. Like, I saw outages when we had like, yes, a lot of super small queries, right, that were executed super often, like 1,000 times a second. And we've got two ways actually to do that. One way would be like to have some kind of cron job that would change log mean duration statement to 0, and after some short period of time, like switch back, right?
Oh,
That would be
nice.
one. And
Yep.
yeah, and this the second one would be, there is like the new method that I haven't tried yet on production, but there is the sampling. So, in Postgres, like I haven't tried it yet, but it might be something to consider. So for now, I was just doing cron job. But to be very honest with you, it's a problem when you are analyzing then the report, right? Because you see really weird like charts. So you always need to keep that in mind, that you've got this switch in the cron job.
Yeah. Or for the fast queries, rely on something like pgstat statements if you have that on already, for example. But back to PG Badger, I looked at the docs and some of the other ones that people might want to switch on that have low overhead. Stop me if I mention one that is dangerous. But we have log checkpoints, log connections, log disconnections, log lock waits you mentioned already, log temp files. Do you do any? So the recommendation in the PG Badger docs is to set that to 0.
No, I just set it to 0,
Okay, great. So that's good that you don't see that as being anywhere near as dangerous. I have seen some recommendations to start with a higher setting of that and go downwards as well, which I guess people can do if they want to be extra cautious. But if you've tuned WorkMem at all already, then I guess you should be pretty safe to put that to 0.
I've never seen any problem when I tweaked with temp files or checkpoints, to be very honest. Like,
Okay.
maybe there are some narrow use cases, but for over the years, I've never seen any problems with other settings. Like the same with auto vacuum. Like, people also are a bit afraid about the auto vacuum, but it's not. It's a couple lines like per minute, and yeah, it will not hit your system that much.
Nice. And yeah, you've got one that I forgot there, which is log auto vacuum min duration. Set that to 0 as well, so that we get the important vacuum stuff. Great. So that lets people get this set up. And I've checked some hosting. So seeing as you work on a managed Postgres provider, do you have some of these set by default, or is this something that people need to go in and change?
Yes, for instance, because I work at Microsoft, it's the easiest for me to talk about how we've got the setup done, right? I don't know that much other cloud providers, but we've got log connections, log disconnections to on, and users cannot change it. It's read only, and it's because we need it for the internal telemetry of ours. So this is just on. Also, PG Badger needs to have logs in English. So also this is by default on Azure. So a lot of them are already enabled, already on, like on Azure. So this is good news, but still you need to enable logs, you need to enable auto vacuum, you need to enable logging like for other stuff and logline prefix. I know that not on all cloud providers you are able to change logline prefix, as far as I know, at
Interesting.
least. Yes, we do allow that. So this is good news, but I've heard that not on all, like probably AWS doesn't allow that, as I remember. At least
Interesting.
it wasn't a couple of years ago, I remember writing like a script like to parse the logs to be able like to generate like PG Badger, because we were not able like to change logline prefix. And yes, they also have this, they had really weird format, so we needed like to script that would parse that. But good news is that PG Badger introduced support for this log format. So you've got separate format, which is RDS, so you don't need to have custom scripts anymore. So this is good news.
Yeah, I was so impressed reading through the PG Badger docs at all the different formats they support. It's incredibly flexible tool, almost as if it's designed by people that are using it and built by people that use it all the time. But definitely tons of options and lots of auto recognizing formats and file types and things like that. So for a lot of people, I would guess it would just work. And for people on cloud providers, you've written a great post for using it with Azure, but there's also, I found a couple of posts from people from the RDS team and from Google Cloud SQL teams that explain how to use it with their systems as well. If any other cloud providers are listening and have guides, please send them to me and I'll include them up in the show notes. But yeah, it feels like this is a tool people could be using even if they're on managed Postgres providers.
Exactly. It makes me really happy to see like the, blog posts from AWS and Google Cloud, because exactly as you said, it means that they're using PG Badger, like the users of the ATT managed services are using, right, the PG Badger. So it was probably needed, right?
Nice. Yep. And also it means this thing can live on, right? We don't have to completely replace it with cloud native tools. It still should work, right? Still, Postgres, the only place it currently puts some of this information is in the logs. So at some point, we're going to have to look at the logs, and having a tool to do so often helps. Cool. All right. So we've mentioned the min duration being a potential gotcha. Are there any others that we need to be cautious of when using this?
About the parameter settings, actually, this is like the most dangerous. So not that much, I would say. Like the other thing you might have problem with, like it's the size of the log itself. So I had sometimes like a problem, when I was like receiving from the customer just terabytes of logs, and it was okay, here are my logs, just generate whatever you want from that, right? And yeah, that also might be a problem. And although PG Badger has this -J option, like most of Postgres tools, right? It's still like on my own laptop, it was like days. So yes, so still, like if you've got like really huge amount of logs, you probably still need powerful VM just to parse the logs. Otherwise, like it will not work.
Yeah. I saw it has both -J lowercase and -J uppercase. So it has like two different ways of handling. I think the first one is for parallelizing, like having multiple CPUs handling a single large log file. I didn't hear terabytes. All the examples I saw were in gigabytes, so that's quite scary. But I think -J was even faster if you had, let's say, like if you were given 20 large log files and you wanted to give 20 CPUs and handle them one at a time, like one CPU per file. So that's quite cool that it has multiple ways of handling like huge workloads. But terabytes of logs is terrifying. Did they have to? So I saw in that, like, it has so many options, by the way. I have in fact, a quick trivia question for you. It has so many -single letter commands that I had noticed there are only 2 letters in the English alphabet that it doesn't have a that letter. Can you guess which letters they are?
Oh, it's not gonna be easy, to be honest.
Only K and Y. It's not fair. Only K and Y, and there is even they even have an option that's keep comments. So my recommendation to the PG Badger team is to make that the K, and then they only have to find one more, and they have the whole alphabet. Anyway, sorry, that's not very useful for people. But
no, this is actually a great point, because sometimes the customers has got like some non-common questions, right? For instance, I had a customer that had a problem, like performance problem, and they wanted to share PG Badger with me, but they were not able to because of the data, right? Like because they were not able like to to show me the queries, and I didn't even know. But yes, PG Badger has so many options that I quickly check, and there's like this anonymize option, like
Wow. Yep.
yeah, so you can find a lot of stuff, like really a lot of options in PG Badger. So this is actually a great point.
I was going to ask about two of them actually, B and E, so beginning and end. If we have a huge log file, but we only, let's say it's from a month of logs or something, and we only care about, let's say, a day or two that we had problems. If we set beginning and end, would that drastically speed things up as well, or are we still going to be? Yeah.
Depends, right, of the size of the file. So it's more like operating system question, I would say, because sometimes if you've got really huge file, like you need to read, your operating system need to read it anyways, right? So in this case might not help that much. So it's long story, but with really huge logs, like huge files, I've been trying like a lot of stuff, and I've been trying like to split the files, using just the split commands. Like I was trying like a lot of different ways, but finally what works the best is just huge VM. Like really, like this is the easiest way, and you just put that on huge VM and you've got it solved.
Nice. Cool. Okay. I saw you hosted one of the PG SQL Friday. We've done a couple of podcast submissions to that event, and yours was on PG Badger. But I saw Laetitia Avro submitted a post, and one of the things they mentioned was flexibility. So they really like to, typical Postgres consultant, or not typical, but extra on the Postgres side, they parse the logs into a Postgres database in order to be able to query them, but like giving them a little bit more flexibility. So I guess we are somewhat limited by the reports that PG Badger gives us, but in the real world, it's giving us so much useful information that I guess those cases are a bit more like few and far between, and we get most of the way there just with the PG Badger report. Is that fair?
I saw the answer from Laetitia, and this is actually interesting, like parsing this to database, especially like I had a lot of ask about that from ex-Oracle DBAs, right? They always were asking if there is a way like to do that, right? So it might be useful, but when I was a consultant, because I'm not that much anymore, like I do prefer like to use something that I can just ping a link to, like the tool that is already there and it works, and just pinging the link like generate me that, and focusing on writing my own tools. But okay, I don't say it's wrong or something, but it's just easier for me. And also what I like is the visual part, because like the visual part, it's really something that allows you super quickly like to go to the root cause. It's not that easy with the text, like, or with if you're doing the query and you've got the result, okay, but you need to focus a bit more. And with PG Badger you've got this chart and you just see everything straight away. So it's way easier, way faster for me, and you've got like all the answers straight away. So it's just a matter of preferences, I would say. My preference is to have graphical presentation.
Yeah, that's a huge pro for a lot of people, me included. You've also mentioned another one there, which is which I don't think we've mentioned, is how tried and tested this is. This is I think I looked it up, and it was 2012 PG Badger V1 came out, April or May time, and it's version 12.4 now, with a ton of bug fixes and all sorts of feature improvements since then. So to start writing your own tool, we've already mentioned some of the features we get, but there's honestly dozens of settings that it has, more than the ones I mentioned. Not just every letter covered, but multiple letters have lowercase and uppercase, and there are quite a few that don't have shortcuts. Like there's another few dozen that are just you have to set separately. So it's incredibly flexible and tested. Like it's been tested for many years, which is worth a lot.
Exactly. Like to be honest, to write your own tool that would be that comprehensive, it would have like so many dashboards, so many information in it. Like it's years. So yeah, I do prefer to have this tool instead of writing my own. But I totally get people like you know that prefer to write their own tools.
Nice. And is there anything that they could be doing? Like, I think, is it Gilles Delvaux? I don't know quite how to pronounce their name, but the maintainer, is there anything they could be doing, or is there anything you'd like to see in PG Badger in the future?
I would like to see the support for Azure. That would be my main thing. And probably also like the thing about the logs. And I know this is not easy because it's not that easy like to get that from the logs. But in the logs tab, you would see only the queries that were logged, not like the queries that caused the log. And
Yeah.
of course, like there is like simple reason because of that, because it's how Postgres is doing this, right? But sometimes if you've got log mean duration statement to 0, right, and you've got PID in the prefix, you can just correlate, right? Because Postgres would normally tell you like, okay, this PID is blocking your query, right? So then you can, search for this PID and maybe you've got like the query and try to correlate that, because it's not that useful. Like if you just see like the queries that are locked and not what is actually locking the queries, right? So you need to have additional cron job with the lock query, like to compare with. So yeah, that's for sure like would be an ask, but I'm not sure if this is actually the ask to Giles. I also not sure how to pronounce his name, so I'm saying Giles. I'm not sure if this is like an ask to Giles or more to Postgres committers, to be honest, like just to have that in the logs.
Yeah, to log more information. So yeah, that makes sense that it might be there. Cool. And yeah, it's released under the PostgreSQL license, which is one of the more most permissive licenses I've ever seen, which is awesome. So thank you for doing that. Thanks for all your hard work on it. Is there anything else you'd like people to know?
Nothing coming to my mind, to be honest.
Oh, actually, I had, because you started with throwing shade at pgstat statements, I did wonder if there were any. So, like, for example, with pgstat statements, we can see things like buffers. Like, we can see the amount of work done by each query. So, reads, writes, so temp, shared, that kind of thing. I don't think. Is there a way to see that kind of information? I guess we could look at the auto explain logs, but I don't think PG Badger's doing anything at the moment to aggregate those per query group.
No, I've never seen that. Just thinking if we would have like more if we would change error verbosity, if that would be logged and then presented. But I haven't seen that, so I don't want to guess. But like for me actually the PG Badger, it's like I'm going to the top queries, and when I see top query, like maybe let's go first through the process that will be easier. So when I see the top queries, sometimes it just you just see what's wrong. Like it's really pretty often, like much more often that you would guess, like just you see, okay, this is not in right, or this is something similar. So you just see that, right? So you don't need to even run explain analyze. But if you don't, then I just take the query and run explain analyze on that, and that's the next step I would do. So but yes, you are right.
And then you can ask for buffers.
Exactly. And then like buffers, yes, absolutely. I would use the option.
So just to clarify on that, I think this is great. So top queries is a really good point, and it orders those by total execution time. So across all calls, right? So you see it could be a slow query that's run a few times that's taking up the most resources, or it could be a fairly fast query that's being run thousands of times per second, as you mentioned, and they're ordered by, I believe the main report is by total execution time. Is that right?
You've got like couple sections on this page. So you've got the most important one that I'm using. It's exactly the one that you mentioned. So the total execution time. That this is always like the first thing I'm looking at. Like what took the most time of this from the system. Which queries, and it doesn't matter for me. Just one query, or it was like multiple execution of another queries, right? So this is like probably the third section from the top. But we also have another aggregations like like the slowest individual queries, other stuff. But I usually don't look at that, to be very honest. I just taking this is absolutely my favorite. If I need, then I go. But it's absolutely my main point, like to go there and see.
Nice. That's what I like to recommend people do on pgstat statements as well. But I guess with this one, with PG Badger, we get more of an opinionated, shows people what to look at rather than pgstat statements. People can query and order by whatever they want. So I see a lot more people making that mistake, or just looking at their slowest queries rather than the totals. Amazing. Alicia, thank you so much for your time today. Is there anything you want to plug, or anything you want to share with people?
Actually, if I may plug my songs, because I just realized not many people do know my songs. I produced 2 songs. The first was about the vacuum, and the second one, actually, you were author of the lyrics, right? So there are 2 Postgres songs out there. And yes, we are co-producers of the second one. So yeah, that would be absolutely my plug.
That's kind of you. The lyrics are extremely basic for that second one, so I apologize to people in advance, but you did an awesome job with the vocals, and that was not me, the vocals, and the video as well was a nice one of all the Postgres events. So yeah, you did an awesome job. I will happily link those up in the show notes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alicia. It's been a pleasure. Take care.
Thank you, Michael. Bye.